It's a really informal panel today, so if you guys have any questions or anything like that, we're certainly going to ask for participation. So definitely welcome to the IPG Women in Leadership Network Breakfast. I'm Sarah Shields, I'm from McCann, and I'm going to be your host for today. I do recognize that 8:30 is very, very early for most people in communications, so I appreciate all of you being here. This might be some of your first experiences with WLN, especially a lot of the gentlemen I see in the audience. So a special thank you to you. WLN is an IPG-wide organization that promotes advancement, retention, and recruitment of women. However, our goal really is to inspire both women and men in the communications industry. And we do these quarterly events and have speakers and networking like today. And we actively encourage everyone to get involved. So today's topic is reputation and career growth, how to make it work for you. And this topic was really in part inspired by a report done by our very own Weber Shenwick called the Female CEO Reputation Premium. So this study really does extensively explore the value of reputation in the C-suite, especially for women. But the importance of a good reputation on your career growth and leadership certainly apply all the way down to the most junior levels. The purpose of today is really for this panel to give you their own insights and their wisdom on the topic. And hopefully you'll leave here today with some tangible tips and tricks to start to build your own brand and progress your career. After this panel, we'll invite each table to talk amongst yourselves and talk about your own career goals and challenges, led by your table leaders. I think you have the topics on your table. And then we'll open the floor for any questions you might have from the panel. Again, these sessions are really meant to be interactive, and we want to make sure that we're all connecting, all of us as part of IPG, and talk about different topics that affect women in our industry. So certainly do get involved. Your input really is valuable to IPG and the growth of our company. So with that, let's get started, and I'd like to introduce your panel for today. So please welcome Helen Graney, Managing Director at Jack Morton, and she's bringing her female leadership experience to today. Next, we have Molly Blaker. She is Strategy Executive from who is bringing her view of just starting to build her brand and her own personal experiences. And then we have Kate Borer. So she's the founder of Young Professional Women Australia, and she's bringing a fantastic external perspective to our panel today. And then finally, we have Ian. Ian Rumsby is the Chief Strategy Officer, APAC Chairman, Australia at Weber Shenwick. He's replacing Alistair, who's on the schedule for today, who unfortunately could not be here. But Ian brings his fantastic male perspective to our panel. No pressure. So first, I'd like to start with the topic of personal brand and reputation. So Ian, you're up first. What are some of the key issues that face more junior level leaders today? And how much of the Weber Shenwick report I mentioned earlier about reputation in the C-suite is relevant to them?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here as well. I think the report that Weber Shenwick did earlier this year looked at the impact of a CEO's reputation on an organization, and it threw up a number of quite interesting observations, I think, many of which are actually applicable to folks here. I don't think we have many CEOs in the room here today, yet. The reality is, that'll be a Weber Shenwick person at the front, offering their early intervention and point of view. No one told me it'd be like that. So what's this report about? It basically is about, it looks at the importance and prevalence of social visibility, primarily on how the reputation of a CEO and the reputation of an organization is increasingly aligned. In other words, the interest of the leadership, the visibility of the leadership, both socially and through other means as well, has a profound impact on the reputation of the organization. Now, what's kind of interesting when you take a deeper dive, particularly on the female element of this, is what we saw is that, and this report was, by the way, undertaken across all regions, so US, Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa in part as well, was that a very small percentage of senior leaders actually want to be CEOs in the first place. But when you look at the split on that, 23% of women did want to be a CEO, whilst 32% of men wanted to be a CEO. However, and I think this is what's most interesting, particularly when it comes to mentorship and leadership within our own organisation, is there was a fairly significant jump in women who aspired to become a CEO when the current CEO was female. That actually went up to 29%. So we're still talking about relatively small figures, but there's perhaps a number of factors to draw from that. One is about your own personal visibility, your own personal brand for those who aspire to take on leadership roles. And leadership, let's not face it, for the majority is not about being a CEO. It is about leading groups of people. And then there's this other element, I think, about the importance of having female leaders in fundamentally breaking that glass ceiling. Because when they're in place, it motivates a whole new generation of people who aspire to that role as well. So when we're talking about leadership and gender equality in the workplace, it really impacts all levels of an organisation.
Fantastic. And it also talked about just the general reputation of women and how that played a role on their progression into CEOship. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's important for your own teams to have their own strong reputation? And do you look to your own staff to promote them up if they have a strong reputation within your own organisation?
Yeah, I mean, reputation is an interesting word, isn't it? I mean, I think the responsibility of any organisation, whether it's in media and communications or anything else, is fundamentally to create a culture that allows people to share their point of view and to have an opinion. And so when we talk about social visibility, what we look for and encourage from the Weber Shandwick side of things, I think and I hope across all of our businesses, is giving people the opportunity to share their point of view. So it is therefore the responsibility of the leadership team, whether male or female, to create that cultural environment that allows people to have a point of view and to express that as well. There's a big issue and question mark around confidence and self-esteem. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. And so for me, I think both through this report and certainly from my own experience, any organisation that gives anyone within the business, particularly female members of staff, the opportunity to express themselves and to encourage them to do so, is an organisation that will flourish.
Fantastic. And I think there's a lot of themes that will come through about what Ian's talking about mentoring, and I think that's going to be key in career growth and certainly helping to build reputation. So I think I'd like to talk about kind of foundations of career growth. And Helen, if I could ask you, regarding your own career growth, and obviously now in your position at Jack Morton, what are things you did well along the way to help your career growth, and maybe what are the things that you did less well?
That's probably a longer list. I think there will be a lot of recurring themes throughout this conversation. I think one of the things that I was always blessed with, and I think probably dating, going back to simply the influence of my family and then other mentors and people that I had around me, I think I always was very lucky to have quite a strong sense of personal confidence, and never really too much of a focus on the gender issue. So it was never really too much of a question for me about my own ability. I think what I've learned to understand in later years is that for that to be really, really successful, I think it has to be balanced with a sense of self-awareness. And I talk a lot to people that I work with about fine-tuning their EQ and their emotional intelligence, because I think confidence without that can sometimes be the wrong kind of ego. But I think it really is interesting. Statistically, women don't back themselves as much or as easily or as readily as men often do. So I think trying to work out what you're really good at, what you need to work on, and having the self-awareness to surround yourself with people that can help bolster you. I think from a mentoring perspective, I think it's highly unusual for people to get everything that they want or need from a single person. So I think I did a pretty good job of building communities, and I think that's something that we were talking about yesterday as well, of people that I could tap into for different things, different feedback, different sources of support, knowing that you're not always going to get everything that you need from one person. I think the thing that I wished the letter I'd write back to younger me is probably focused around recognizing that leadership is not a seniority or a hierarchical thing. I think developing yourself as a leader within your community and your teams is probably one of the best things that you can possibly think about doing. Think about the leadership values that you want to give off. Think about the behaviours. Think about how you want to be perceived as a leader and how you want to be seen. And I think anybody within the business can develop their leadership qualities. It doesn't matter whether you're in the entry level of the business or at the most senior levels. Leadership is about a behaviour. It's about how you react and behave with your colleagues and your teams. And I think you can really develop your leadership qualities at any level. When I first became a manager, I was horrible. For me, it was about power and control, command and control. And I just didn't know what to do with it. I hadn't really thought about it in any other way. So that is the one thing I don't think I did very well. And the message I would send back in the time capsule to younger me is to recognise that those leadership qualities can start to be built from a very early stage in the career, and they will stand you in good stead if you do.
Brilliant. All right. And Kate, now you're in the mentoring business. How important do you think confidence that Helen had spoke about earlier is to women and actually men in the workplace?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Excuse me, we've done a lot of work over the last 18 months around this whole subject of confidence. For me, when I've got a background in professional services, so a chartered accountant by profession, and then have kind of been in this space, the consulting space, for the last 7 years, and very much kind of in the young professional women space. The last 18 months has seen, I've had a lot of conversations with senior executives who really challenged me around whether it is a female-centric conversation. When we talk around career clarity, resilience, and confidence, for me, are the three main themes that I see as challenges for women. And not surprisingly, I had a number of sort of younger men in their late 20s come into my world who I was mentoring. And sure enough, confidence comes up, resilience, career clarity. So I do think it's common across both genders. I think they're different conversations, which we're big advocates for, and we collaborate with a partner in Melbourne who does some of the core male conversations. But I think to your point earlier, there's one thing for an organisation to invite our people and women to step up and put their hand up. It's a completely other conversation for women to do that. And we see it all the time. I constantly hear stories of senior executives who might run into a male grad and a female grad in the lift and say, hey, make sure you come by and have a chat with me later. And sure enough, the male one does and the female one doesn't. Likewise, in that whole conversation of if you do have the opportunity to get in the lift, and I always use this scenario, you get in the lift with the CEO, what's the conversation you have? Is it about the weather, or do you talk about some of the wins that you've had recently in the team and what's been going on? Now, what stops people from having the latter conversation is confidence around what am I going to say, because the risk of looking stupid is big and we don't want to risk that at all. And so for me, there's two things around confidence. It's number one, get clear about what you stand for. That talks to personal brand. Because to know what your strengths are, to know the value you bring to an organisation is one thing, and that doesn't just fall out of the sky. You actually need to do the work to be able to articulate that, and then have the confidence that when you are in those situations that present themselves, to be able to have the conversation, share some wins, and have a meaningful dialogue, because what you're doing there is you're positioning yourself, you're talking about being visible. And I was on panel recently and it was such a beautiful quote, and they said, you have to do the work. And we're very good at that. Women are very, very good at that. So you've got to do the work hard, but you've got to have your hand up all the time. I want to. And to your point, Helen, it's, being involved in all those things. I often say leadership starts from a very young age. We see leadership skills in children as they progress through school. I certainly know in my own experience that was something that I really wanted to do. And if I look back on my childhood and my role in through school, I was always getting involved in those sorts of things. So I think doing the work to get clear about what you want to say and what you stand for is crucial, and then being able to articulate in a way that means that you feel comfortable and confident to do so. And I think, if we talk about mentoring over the last 5 years has been very popular. We've kind of gone through this evolution of coaches, mentors, and now we're starting to hit into the world of sponsorship. So we've done some research at the beginning of the year. It's about to be released in September. And what we know is around sort of 80% of, and it was a dual gender piece of research, predominantly female, but we pushed to get the male perspective as well because I wanted the contrast. But about 80% of people have mentors, so it's very popular. 2% have sponsors. And the mentor, it was formal and informal, but only 2% have sponsors. And the sponsorship conversation talks much more to personal brand. Because you generally with mentoring you will often ask for a mentor, and that's kind of how you go about doing that. It's a whole other conversation. It doesn't have to be formal.
Yep.
We really advocate, and personally I've and again, this is all stuff I've done since I've left my corporate world. I wish if I was to do the letter to the younger me that I did a lot more of this when I was working in corporate. I think it's a necessity today in the corporate environment that we work in. It probably wasn't 10 years ago or so. But I'm a big advocate of the informal mentor and I've got a number of people who are in my world who have very specific skill sets and experience, and they're a mentor for me in that particular area. And I'm very proactive about making sure I spend time with them. If you were to ask them, are you one of Kate's mentors, they probably wouldn't even know it. But what's important is those conversations are happening for me on a regular basis.
It's interesting. Sorry, just one point on this is that I think it strikes me when you're talking about it this way that most of us are all pretty good at being acutely disciplined in what we do in our work every single day. I think very few of us have applied the same level of discipline to our careers and to our aspirations for leadership as well. And so perhaps and where there's a lack of or an absence of confidence, the fact is that you deliver that confidence in what you do through a planning process every single day. If you can then switch that and actually turn that inward, maybe look at your own career, then and prepare for that, literal elevator speech to the CEO when you're there, then why not?
And we talk, when we run whole day confidence workshops, one of the premises around that is the act of confidence comes before the feeling of confidence. So most people are waiting to feel 100% confident to step forward, and it's actually the action that comes before the feeling.
That's really interesting. I think you spoke about that yesterday, saying you give the opportunity to people who work for you, but you want them to raise their hand. They have to do it and step up to be there. So I think that's a really good theme to come out of that, is that, there's people who want to help, but make sure you fake it till you make it. And put
Absolutely. And I said to somebody, I was talking at a women's group a couple of weeks ago, sorry Molly, and then we were all shut up. No, you don't get away with it. I was talking to a young group the other day, and I said, if you think I don't stand at the door of a cocktail function with 400 to 500 people in there that I've never met, if you think I don't stand there and have butterflies in my stomach and stand there and look and see if I can work out which group of conversation looks the most penetrable and think, right, what am I going to say, and don't say anything stupid, if you think that gets easier, it doesn't. But to your point, the act of confidence has to come before the confidence, and just the more you do it, the easier it gets. Sometimes.
Well, I think that's a good point, because Molly, obviously, you're a strategy executive at so you're starting just to build your brand. And you've said you've already landed your dream job already. But considering where you are in your career, what steps have you taken to get on this path?
So I think it started when about a month into my first job out of uni at and which I kind of fell into. I knew media was right, but I still didn't really know what media was. I went to this wonderful training session on what is media strategy, and from that moment I was besotted. And I came back and I had a wonderful group director at the time, and I said, I want to be a strategist, how do I make it happen? And she, because I had put up my hand, as you guys were touching on earlier, she said, okay, right, you need a mentor, you need this, this is what you have to do. And because I had put up my hand, she was able to then take that conversation to the upper management that she had regular contact with. Anytime they said, oh, we need help out on something to do with a strategy task, maybe it was more of an admin task, maybe it was something a bit more exciting, but she could always put my name in the hat. And then obviously developing a relationship with my first mentor, who was a strategist but not in my immediate team, was really helpful. And I kind of thought it was more just I said something on a whim, I want to be in strategy, and all of these things happened for me off the back of it. So I think I was quite lucky in that regard. I didn't really realise what I was doing, but absolutely, if I hadn't put up my hand, there's no way that I would have got any of the opportunities that I got. off the back of it. And I guess just when you do have those opportunities, absolutely having to just run with it. And you may not feel very confident in what you're doing. You may think, oh, what have I got myself into? But you just have to absolutely just run with it. And, you know, I think people, especially when you're starting out, people see you getting excited and being driven or acting driven, maybe not being driven, but acting driven. And they really appreciate that. And, you know, no one is going to fault you for making a little mistake over putting your hand up to help out in something really quite exciting. And, you know, I think companies as well like that, because there's always lots of talk about Gen Y and, you know, job hopping. And so if they see people who are actually putting their hand up and wanting to establish career growth as opposed to get a promotion and then go somewhere else for a bigger pay, I think that's something that's really valuable, and people often give you opportunities off the back of that.
And you did we talked a little bit about Gen Y yesterday in terms of, you know, there's a lot of perceptions about Gen Y, and I think that goes back a little bit to what Helen said, is that you can't have the confidence without kind of backing it up. And I think it's making sure you balance, you know, the work ethic and with that confidence and going forward, otherwise you get the wrong kind of ego. But I'd also like to touch on something that you talked about yesterday, Molly, because I think Kate started on it in terms of mentoring. There's a little bit of a shift from mentoring to sponsorship. And you were telling me about a book called Herd, and about the concept of tribes and that mentoringship. You smile because you're probably across it as well, but if you could just tell the group about that.
So in the context of this book, it actually talks about redefining how we look at target audiences from demographics, whether that be age-based or even attitudinally based, but moving more towards tribes and seeing how people actually go through their daily life, and they're not just a part of one group and they interact with different groups, and how that each individual has a tribe around them. And my wonderful mentor, who is here today, and I, we have monthly meetings, and one of the things that we have touched on is who is my tribe. And I think what you were saying earlier about you don't just get everything from one person, and I don't think that's a fair expectation to set on anyone else either. But I mean, you're really the driver of your own career, and if you set up a wonderful tribe around you, not only does it give you those advocates and mentors that you can learn from, and they can do a little bit of cheering for you in the background, but it also gives you this wonderful sense of comfort. And when you have that sense of comfort, you feel like you have a security blanket, you can take these additional risks, and that's really when you get the most out of your career, I have found.
Fantastic. Now, I think we've talked a lot about the positive things. Are there any barriers or anything along the way that you guys have had to overcome in terms of progressing your career growth and your reputation and career growth?
Can I just pick up something that's core to the concept of tribe, or we also language at my team, is actually asking for help. And so it's great to have all these wonderful people around you, but if you're not saying, hey, I really need help too. And it's really, like personally, in the last 12 months, it's really the first time I've stepped into that, where asking for help hasn't felt like it's a sign of weakness, or it felt like by doing that means that I can't. It's been a reframe around it, saying by asking for help, I can achieve a whole lot more. And that's professionally and personally. So I think particularly for women, the challenge or the barrier that comes up around not wanting, how does it reflect on me if I do ask for help, if I do go out and say, hey, this is what I need? And you know, over the last 12 months, you know, the feedback I've had personally, not only people like to help, it feels good, but I've seen it constantly play out where I'm like, I really should have asked that person earlier, because I sat still and I was trying to do it myself and I just kind of faltered. But the minute I reached out and said, hey, can you introduce me to this person, or I'm really looking to connect with some people in this space, do you know anyone? Yeah, no problem, bang, bang, bang. A week later, I've got a meeting with them. So I think the importance of getting out of our own way when it comes to help, and there's a conversation that needs to happen, which is kind of cost benefit, but I think we naturally step back when it comes to asking for help. Whereas if we just put our hand up and say, hey, can you help me? You'll be surprised. 9 out of 10 people are happy to. And, it feels good for them to do that. So it's an equal exchange. When we look at the relationship of mentoring, I often get asked, what does the mentor get out of it? My response to that is I often say to women, I said, so if a younger person came to you and said, hey, would you mind if we caught up for coffee a couple of times a year? I really just want to have a chat about where I'm at in context of career and get some feedback and guidance. What would you say? And they go, yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. And I said, well, that's the exact same thing for the mentors. It's nice to be able to share our experience and have people leverage off our experience. So I think that importance of asking for help.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I think especially at a younger level, you kind of see that conversation as, oh, am I going to be putting someone out? Am I going to be an inconvenience to them? But absolutely not. Everyone that I have spoken to about it, whether they're a mentor or a sponsor or a tribe member, they are just so willing to help. And I just think, maybe it's a reflection on our industry, maybe it's just a reflection on humanity, but it's just, if you don't ask, you won't get.
That's very true. And do you think that mentoring is important for your career and continuing to have mentors?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you ever stop growing. You certainly don't ever stop learning. And I think the point where you think you've reached your peak is the point where you're going to start going backwards very, very quickly. You have to have mentors. You have to have people around you. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, every level.
And I think you have to refresh that source of inspiration as well. And that's something I've been really conscious of in the last couple of years. I think I've been very lucky at having some good people to guide me through life and to be various different sort of sources of inspiration and support. But I am also a big believer that specifically when you've been in a role or an organisation or an industry for a long time, you need to top up that inspiration. And I think that's everybody's also personal responsibility. And I've done that by joining different network groups, company directors, women on boards, connecting with people like Kate. And I think you have to make sure that you keep connecting and broadening that network and topping up the tank of inspiration and influence because it is going to change throughout your career. What you need from people is going to change. And I think I completely agree with Ian. The minute you think, yeah, done, I'm pretty good at this, I don't need any other sources of inspiration, you're probably about to die on the vine. So I think sort of looking for topping that up is really important.
The reality is, as well, is particularly in our industry, we are operating in an extraordinarily disruptive environment. There's so much change within our industry. I think we've got to recognise that mentoring is not always from somebody who's more senior than you in an organisation.
Very good point.
There are a very large number of people in this room who are far more digitally and technically savvy than I am. My industry is very much in that space right now. I need, what do you call it, mentorship, inspiration. You need to be able to draw this from people right around you. So I don't see mentorship as being a sort of a top-down function. It's very much a 360 function. It's about wrapping yourself in a tribal fashion with people who provide inspiration from many different sources. And I'm certainly and very genuinely, draw inspiration from people who've been doing this far less years than I have, as much as I do from people who've been doing it for many more years.
And I think that's where your self-awareness comes in, and I think also sort of learning and getting to grips very early on that it's okay not to be brilliant at everything, and to not be threatened by people who... So you should ideally be quite good at something. Just a little mediocre at best. But, I think it's also, and it was a lesson for me through my leadership journey as well, just learning not to be threatened by people who were way better at stuff than me, but learning that that was a compliment, building the tribe, making sure that, and again, it comes down to confidence and self-awareness and insight, just understanding how you can build that pool of people that is together, the sum of the whole is greater than the part, sort of thing.
Mm.
How many in this group, before we break out into panel, how many in here actually have a mentor? All right, pretty good amount. And how many people actually mentor? A few. All right. So these are networking events as well. So we meet up afterward. I think, from the panel, you guys have been fantastic. What we might do is now open it up to the groups to have your individual discussions. if there's anything that falls out of that in terms of questions that you'd like to bring back to the panel, we'll certainly open up the floor to that afterward. But I think you each have some questions to go through. And if you can talk amongst yourselves and make sure that you get anything back up.
Alright, so hi everyone. One question from our table is, what's the difference between sponsorship and mentoring, and how do you get a sponsor?
Yeah, cool. So I was saying to the girls earlier, so a mentor is someone who's been there, done that experience. So one of the things we really advocate when you're looking for a mentor is get clear about the specifics. So if you want to grow your network, then it's go and find someone who has been there and done that. And then that's the focus of the conversation that you want to really be focusing on. They could be younger than you. So I have, people, so we run a mentor program, we do the matching. I have mentors that come to me and say, I really need to grow my network. You've been there, you've done that. Can you help me? So position, age, it's irrelevant. It's about the specific experience. And to a degree, you can ask someone to be a mentor, but I think, to my point earlier, sometimes it's just nice to make it informal. And that's where you say, would it be okay if we catch up 3 times a year for lunch or dinner? Would that be okay? Because sometimes when you say, will you be my mentor, particularly if you've got a lot on, it might feel like a little bit of a weight of responsibility. And the other key piece that we really advocate is, in those sorts of relationships, as the mentee, you drive the conversation. You drive the arranging the time, you drive everything. You be really clear about what you want to take away from the conversations. In my experience, those mentees who have got that, get so much more benefit out of the relationship, and the mentor gets so much more out of the relationship as well. Sponsorship for me is a little bit, it's like someone who is your champion, so your brand advocate. They're the person, and to Molly's point earlier, I heard that person who was sitting in the meetings and go, we could ask Molly to do that, or maybe Molly could do that. It's the person who's sitting there going, putting you forward for opportunities. Typically they're more senior in the organisation, therefore they have more proximity to conversations. That means they might identify opportunities that might be good for you, that might help you get experience, that might progress your career. So there's someone who has the ability and proximity to be able to do that for you. You don't ask for a sponsor, you earn it. Typically, and so that's also the distinction. The importance is about getting really clear about what you're good at, and being able to make sure that other individual, so Molly said, this is what I want, and also, can you help me, but this is what I want, and that person was then out there looking for those opportunities for her to be able to do that. So it's a very new concept in a lot of organisations. We'll see it gain traction though over the next 3 years. KPMG and one of the universities are currently doing a study where they've got 50 women involved in a very formal sponsorship arrangement, because the research shows us that will it will increase the number of women in senior roles.
And does that heighten the need for a focus on reputation and brand? Because presumably if somebody's going to step up and be your sponsor, they're putting their own neck on the line. So they need to know that the person that they're putting forward for these opportunities is clear on their brand, has the competency, but also has a good reputation. So does that heighten that?
Well, that's the instinctive problem, is because if we don't have that, so if I don't know what I stand for, what I'm good at, and I'm not able to articulate that, how do I expect a sponsor to be able to do that on my behalf? So we have to do that first. We have to then communicate that so that we make it easy, because everyone's got a lot on. So we have to make it easy and safe for someone to put their hand up and absolutely put their reputation online because they're backing you.
Yeah.
And then if someone does then take that opportunity, not second guessing yourself. I've been in a situation where I say, oh, well, maybe I'm not doing it right, maybe I'm not doing the right thing, but if someone's put their neck out there for you, you are doing the right thing, and you just need to kind of back yourself and not have those moments. Everyone has moments of self-doubt, but just reassure yourself that if someone is putting their neck on the line here, you're doing the right thing, and you've got the right people around you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Were there any other questions from the group? Don't be shy. Yeah, right there. I'll come back to you right over here.
Hi. I guess I'm wondering, other than doing your job well, what are the really, tactical ways that you can build a reputation or let people know what your reputation is?
Let me give you my thoughts on that, and some of you may have heard me talk about this previously, but I will always assume, usually correctly, that people have a particular level of competency, otherwise they wouldn't be in their job. There's certain skill sets that you have, and that's fine. What we will always look for is people who show initiative, who show intuition and show curiosity. Those three things, for me, are the most important attributes that contribute to an individual's reputation. When they display those sorts of qualities, then that becomes a provocation for a whole range of other things that they do, a range of other behaviours that they show. But certainly from my perspective, those three things, initiative, intuition and curiosity, that sense of exploring what's going on around you. Again, I come back to this point about the environment which all of our entire industry is in at the moment. It's no good anymore simply being a specialist in a particular discipline or particular area. For us to be able to advise and consult the clients that we work with, to mentor, to sponsor people, we need to have a real sense of what's going on around us, what the change is, and importantly what that means, and that's why curiosity is so important.
Fantastic. And I think there's a question up here. Oh, sorry, we'll come back to you. Go ahead. You never know.
I'm Kate, I'm from Weber Shandwick, and we were talking on our table particularly around valuing the time that you put to your own career progression. And particularly in our industry, I think we're all constantly navigating client deadlines and team deadlines and the workloads that we have, that putting an emphasis on, say, mentorship time, or even looking at your own career progression and the goals that you've got, how do we really put the time aside to do that? Or is it because it's a personal thing, we should be focusing on it more so in our personal time?
I think it's probably a combination. I think if anything's important enough to you, like anything, come on, if it's important enough to you, you make time for it. You just do. And if that means that it becomes an extracurricular activity, then it becomes an extracurricular activity. But I think there's no harm in having the discipline to say, one day a month I'm going to take half a day and I'm going to go and meet with a mentor and I'm going to do something. I get it, agency, clients ring, all that kind of stuff, it shifts, but at least you've got a line of sight to it and it's in your diary in a way that it's significant enough. And then maybe 1 in 3 doesn't have to move, or 1 in 5 doesn't have to move. But if it's important enough to you, and I kind of think it's probably fairly, maybe I'm just being a little bit black and white, but I think if it's important enough to you, you make it happen, you just do. And if that's at the weekend or extracurricular, then so be it. And if it's not important to you and you don't want to do it, then great.
I always say you'll never find time.
Yeah.
You have to make time. And the way that I do it is with the people who informally mentor me. I literally will have lunch or dinner, then I walk away from that. I go back to my diary, I send a meeting update for 3 months' time, get it in the diary because then you work around it. You try to get time in someone's diary in 2 weeks, it's impossible. Mm-hmm. But 3 months, generally, they've got nothing else. It's in there, it comes up. That week I confirm it. Again, because it's been in the diary for so long, people tend not to cancel on you as well. And again, what's important, particularly when we talk about mentoring, if they're going to give you time to go and cancel on them 2 days out is quite disrespectful as well. So you really need to manage the process as well with other commitments that you've got going on.
And then I also find sometimes putting certain just little rituals in place. So like I try and kind of have this rule that if I'm on a plane, I'm going somewhere for work. So therefore that's work time. So I kind of resist the temptation to pick up a new weekly at the airport and I read a workbook or a Harvard Business Review or something. And I find that those just basically having that discipline, making that commitment to yourself that this is what I'm going to do, and I try to make sure that I rotate Patricia Cornwell with a new book out on growth or what have you, and it's just you just have to have that discipline. And you're right, it's not easy, but if you kind of create those rules for yourself, you've got a fighting chance.
All right, and now up here. Sorry.
Our question is sort of a follow-on from the reputation question. It was more a different angle of, as senior leaders, how do you notice leadership of people amongst their peers? What are the qualities that you're looking for? And I know you obviously spoke about curiosity and intuition and that, but are there any others that you notice people coming up as leaders in their peer groups?
Molly, why don't you take that one?
As a senior leader.
No, but what? But I think I was saying with one of the tables I was talking with at the back, we were talking about leadership training, and I said I always found that life in and of itself was the best training ground. That I was always had a very, I was very conscious of watching people, and thinking, You know, yeah, I'll take a bit of that. Ooh, don't like that. Ooh, see how people respond to that. Ooh, that's not good. You know, and thinking about those things. And you would see it with the leaders that sorry, I just totally threw you under the bus.
Okay.
But are there any observations that you see of leadership styles that you think that's what I aspire to and that's less so?
Yeah, definitely. I think leaders who are committed to their teams, and I know you the question earlier was about making time, but we were talking about in our industry where people are job hopping and all of that, it's in the company's best interest to keep you, even if they have to replace you with someone and they're paying the same salary. The recruitment fees, it's just not worth it. And having that ongoing commitment to your team and having leaders where I can go a month into my job and say, I want to be a strategist, which is pretty outrageous when I think about it now. But anyway, that leader who then said to me, great, I'll make that happen, and really taking that opportunity. And I know we spoke about this yesterday or last week about how if your team comes to you, you'll meet them halfway. And I think that's a really great quality, and not it all being on the person and making them feel like it's a safe environment for them to come and say, I want this, and then yes, let's make it happen. So I think saying yes is a really powerful thing as a leader, but also empowering to the people in your team is something that I've found really, and just people who are authentic. So I don't want to throw in a new theme there, but having these environments where you feel like you can be your true self, and you know, you don't have to put on a certain act or anything like that, and leaders who are authentic, I think that's something that's really empowering for me.
I think it's a really good pickup, and I think that any we've talked a little bit this morning about faking it, and I think we were talking about faking it from a confidence perspective, but faking your leadership style is exhausting and inauthentic, and the cracks will appear really, really quickly. And the closer you can be to your natural self and your true self as a leader, the better leader I believe that you will be. So I think authenticity is absolutely a word I would add to Ian's list. And the other thing, because I just can't abide it when it doesn't happen, is respect.
Were there any other questions? I think we have time for probably one more. Don't be shy. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all for being here today, and if we can give a huge round of applause to our panel. They have been fantastic, and just, you know, getting part of my table, and I'm sure other tables, I thank you all for really honestly getting involved and being part of the conversation. As I mentioned before, these really help IPG grow as a company, and really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and especially the panel today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
And thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful job.